Good morning or afternoon or evening, everyone. Appreciate you taking the time to join us for this session. The purpose of this is to make you a little more familiar with the proposed bylaws that have been posted on our website and are on the ballot for the general election opening up on February 1st. The restructuring organization restructuring task force that started back in October of 19 has been working to look at how we reorganize the association as a whole on how we can best meet the needs of our members going into the future and continue to thrive. So updates to the Constitution and bylaws were a major part of that, and we've completed that with the help of a number of people. And we wanted an opportunity to make members more familiar with what we were doing and what was contained in that. If you've not had an opportunity, it is posted on our website, the full draft of the proposed bylaws, as well as some explanation to go with that. So, but what we'll do is we'll have, Shoshana is gonna go through and give you some more background and information about the draft, and then we'll open up for Q&A. Thank you. I'll turn it over to you, Shoshana.
Perfect. Well, good evening, good morning, as the case may be. I'm going to start sharing. Can everyone see that? Brilliant. Okay. So as Chris mentioned, this is just an overview of the updates and the process for the updates that was taken to get to the proposed bylaw revision that is part of the election process this year. So let's talk about how we actually got here. Back in October of 2019, a strategic workshop was held with the board of directors, the associate board chairs, and headquarter leads. And the input was the 2019 membership survey. And through the review of the survey and identifying our strategic objectives for the next year to 5-year plan, we realized that we needed to restructure the organization to operate a little more efficiently and better engage with members and acquire new members and really be able to provide a platform in which we could better serve members and answer some of the requests that had come through the membership survey in terms of things that members were saying they wanted out of the organization. So with that, a task force was created to make recommendations for how to actually meet those needs, including updates to the Constitution and bylaws. So the mission, and again, the mission was taken directly from the member survey for the task force, was keep AACE relevant as an association, strengthen what was core to the association, what was really good and wanted and valued by members, while reshaping those areas that needed some improvement to better connect with members and increase the potential for bringing in new members. So we also realized that with that, there was an update to governance required. To increase the transparency of how the organization operates, as well as to offer more dynamism within the way the organization operates so that we could be more effective and flexible in meeting future member needs. So when we're talking about what were the base cases for why we actually wanted to address these changes through a Constitution and bylaws update, we realized in some cases we were not meeting statutory requirements. There were misalignments as well as new requirements that have been developed since the time that the Constitution and bylaws was developed back in the 50s. So we needed to bring our governance up to date with respect to statutes. So regardless of any other changes that were being proposed, the document would need to be updated for that basis alone. Then we also realized there were some conflicts between our governance documents. Over the years, these have been edited in a piecemeal fashion, and in some cases there were disconnects and disjoins with respect to language and intent between the various documents that were referenced. And that, of course, can cause an error-likely situation for boards and committee members as to how to proceed with the best interests in mind of the organization. And then we also realized that some associate boards and committees were not as effective as they could be. The member survey had clearly identified some themes here. And so what was required was bylaw changes to be able to affect the restructuring of these committees and associate boards to actually address those inefficiencies and ineffectiveness elements. And then the way we volunteer and engage with the association has changed over the years. Some of our members are in retirement. Some of them are just new to the profession, and each of those members have different needs and different ways that they want to interact and gain value from the association. So we needed to find a way to ensure that every member could interact and engage with the association in the way that best met their needs. And currently, the current constitution and bylaw, it did not address those changes or allow for future changes. And the current constitution and bylaws is a single model. But again, we are AACE International, and making sure that we addressed the global footprint needed us to look at various ways to actually be dynamic and interact. And of course, through COVID, we've actually implemented a number of those tactics to address these things just by virtue of having to do so. But these were suggestions and recommendations as part of the task force. And then we also, as a learning organization, we wanted to go back and look at what industry best practices are recommending organizations such as ourselves do and incorporate those lessons learned into our update. So that's the base case for why, but what does that actually mean for members? In the end, the proposed constitution and bylaws that is being presented will allow for more flexibility in developing options to engage. We are increasing the clarity and transparency between the governance and how AAC operates and serves its members. We're making sure that there are more and direct lines of communication between headquarters, the associate boards and committees, and allowing for greater support of sections and others directly from headquarters. So let's talk about the Robert's Rules of Order. As an association, that's what we follow. So we wanted to make sure that we can actually implement and affect the changes that we were proposing. So under Robert's Rules, which we follow, there are certain elements of governance documents, the first being a constitution. And when we're talking about a constitution from the perspective of a public or private group, this is really the document that states the vision, the missions, and the values under which they will work. And in most states, the Articles of Incorporation is the only document required to actually fulfill that need. And then under that is the bylaws. And this is essentially the document that contains all of the rules that are so important to the organization that they cannot be changed in any way without previous notice. And then under that, the next one in the hierarchy are the rules of order, which is essentially those rules that define how the organization operates and transacts its business and defines the duties of officers, and then standing rules. And in reverse hierarchy, no standing rule or rule of order can conflict with a bylaw, and so on all the way back up. So how does that translate to AACE's governing document body? Well, we have 3 governance documents in our association. The Articles of Incorporation, it's legally status filed with the state, and it addresses the primary Robert's Rules constitution requirements. Then we have our bylaws. These are our fundamental rules, and it addresses all of the requirements of bylaws under Robert's Rules. And then we have our policy and procedures manual, which is basically how the association is run, and that addresses all the requirements of rules of order and standing order. So some might say, you know, we had a constitution and bylaws, and now we're just going down to a bylaws. You know, why would we do this? So we did the literature review, and from the perspective of those in the know of Robert's Rules, they suggest that you know, having these 2 things creates an error likely situation. You have to keep both up to date at the same time. And as we know from our organizations, when we update our governance, you know, sometimes there are misalignments. So you want to make sure that everything is consistent and is only in a single place. So what we proposed was we would consolidate the Constitution and bylaws into a single bylaws document, keeping the elements of the Constitution that were not covered in the Articles of Incorporation in the bylaws and removing everything else. So what that means is the organization manual needs to be elevated within the governance hierarchy of the association. We've always had this organization manual. Unfortunately, it's sort of been not very transparent or easily available or easily referenced. So what we realized is a number of things. One, our bylaws contained a number of elements that could be considered rules of order or standing order nature. So we recommended that those get moved out of the bylaws and into the organization manual. And then the organization manual gets revamped to better align with the structure and table of contents that flows out from the bylaws, and make sure that this organization manual is now visible to members and posted at all times on the website, and that it becomes part of the governance structure from the perspective of updates. So members would be notified when the org manual is updated. So pictorially, what does that look like? Our current governance included the Articles of Incorporation and Constitution. That's been translated over into Articles of Incorporation and bylaws. The bylaws has been translated again into the bylaws and the org manual. And the org manual, where it was previously a non-entity in the organization, has become elevated in the structure. We had a 5-month period in which these bylaws that are posted for member voting were reviewed and inputted to by a number of stakeholders. All of the associate boards, the past presidents, the Constitution and Bylaws Committee, and the Board of Directors have provided input. And so it was not done in isolation. One might be asking, where did all of the stuff in the Constitution actually end up then? So if you look at the current Constitution, on the left-hand side of the table, this is the table of contents of the current Constitution. We've now shown you where it's actually going to be covered in whole or in part in the new governance structure that's being proposed. So it's all still there, it's just there in another place. And from the perspective of the organizational structure defined by this new governance structure, what does that look like? So the bylaws defines and establishes the board of directors, headquarters, and all of the associate boards, the ethics committee, the governance committee, and the nominations committee. The others, the membership advisory committee, although the election of regional directors and the election of the board of director officer who will oversee the membership is defined in the bylaws, the actual membership committee itself is defined in the org manual. Sections are defined in the org manual, but established in the bylaws. The online communities is established in the org manual. The awards committee, rising professionals and women in project controls is all established in the org manual. However, the definition of the ability to have these committees is defined in the bylaws. Just the transactional elements of what those look like and how they'll operate is defined in the org manual. So we mentioned 6 elements of the justification for changing the bylaws to the proposed version that is being presented. Now let's talk about some of the others. Legal compliance. The existing articles of incorporation don't comply with current statute. So as I said, regardless of any other changes, we would have had to make changes to the document for this alone because we need to update it to meet legal requirements. Now, membership. In the current Constitution, membership and all of the various classes are defined in very explicit terms. However, when you look at the requirements for bylaws, we only require the definition of member classes based on qualification and rights. We have essentially 2 member classes, regular members, and that includes all of the subcategories such as corporate, fellows, emeritus, life members, military, public partners, and student members. And so all AACE members have the same qualifications to join and benefits, except for student members who cannot vote. Only the fees are different. So member categories are now being defined in the organization manual in terms of how they'll be established and transacted. The associate boards and committees, it was clear from the membership survey responses that the TEC associate boards are the core components to AACE. This is what makes us great. This is what everybody loves about the organization and what they feel brings the most value, the products and services provided by these associate boards. So those are still established and codified by the bylaws. Membership and marketing, though, have been redefined. So they're established, as I said, in the org manual to allow us to enable changes as required. The membership advisory committee will combine region, section, and at-large representation to increase the inclusivity, and marketing will be done through staff and volunteers. The other committees are going to be established as needed in the org manual, and we listed a couple of them on the organizational slide earlier. So another change to allow us to have a little bit more flexibility is the term subunits in the bylaws rather than specifically calling out sections and regions. And the reason why we've chosen this holistic reference is to allow potential future growth and virtualization of organizational units within our association. So this way we can allow ourselves to iterate and modify how member needs are met. We can maintain sections, but we may evolve how the minimum standards will be defined over time. We allow for the ability to engage virtually with members, and we allow for the flexibility of more direct member to headquarter interface. So the last real major change in the proposed bylaw is the executive committee, and this has been completely removed from the proposed bylaws. And the justification and thinking was, with the current and proposed board structure, the executive committee is no longer relevant. Once upon a time, when there were 17 members on the board, it may have been useful to help speed things along, but now all it does is add an added bureaucratic layer, and it provides the misrepresentation that the executive committee is making all of the decisions, where the officers and directors are just being told what to do, when in fact that is not the case. The officers and directors are still responsible for day-to-day actions. So this makes that transparently clear that that's the function and the way that the board operates. So in conclusion, board of directors elected by members through the codified nomination process, and they're entrusted to guide and protect the organization. The proposed changes to the Constitution and bylaws, now called the Bylaws, is going to allow for increased visibility of our governance documents and the board decisions and actions. And the intent and the hope is that this will foster member trust and ensure that it's warranted and maintained through transparency in what's being done and how it's being done. And with that, I will turn it back over to Chris.
Thank you, Shoshana. I just, at this point, want to give everyone an opportunity to ask any questions you may have or offer any thoughts with regards to this. And it obviously a lot of material in a very short period of time. And if you've not had an opportunity to review the draft prior to this, then your head may be swimming just a little bit, but hopefully you got the gist of what we're trying to do. So if there are any questions, just type them into the Q&A window and we can address those. If not, I can ramble on a little bit longer, but otherwise then I'll have to go get coffee. So yeah, I think one of the things that Shoshana touched on was just the wealth of input that we got from all of the members from the different associate boards, and including past presidents. And I think it was really helpful getting a wide range of perspectives from everyone in terms of things that we didn't think of when we came out with the first draft. And everyone's not only got a different perspective, but different priorities in terms of what they think are the essential elements of the association. So I think, by going through this iterative process with the input of a large number of people, we were able to make sure we have a document that maintains the core essence of AACE and what our members most value. So.
And also, if I can just add one note that we didn't put in that circle there of input, was our association's legal counsel weighed in from a compliance perspective, just to make sure we were dotting the I's, crossing the T's, and up to date with everything. And our attorney specializes in association law and governance documents.
Deb, you just read my mind, because I just realized as Chris was talking that we forgot that one little, key piece.
Kind of important, yeah.
So, okay. Any questions? Any comments? So I'll read this out. It was mentioned earlier on that a main objective was to better engage with existing members and acquire new members. I didn't quite catch how the changes will address that. Can you address that again? I think part of the goal is, or the objective is, that right now we basically have a section model that is our, I don't want to say front line for engaging members, because those that are not involved in sections still have an active relationship with the association. But we have found with our international growth that there are a lot of countries where our current section model is challenging, frankly. Challenging to set it up because of government regulations, banking laws, whatever the case may be. And so we're trying to look for other opportunities to engage with members regardless of location. And I think, one of the things I mentioned, I drafted up a president's message for the thing, but I think we mentioned here, like virtual sections. The option for having online type sections where people can engage with other members in different ways that's not really kind of addressed in our current structure. So those are the kind of options that we think we may want to have going into the future. And I think the reality is part of what we're trying to do here is leave space for things that we frankly are not creative enough to think of yet. you know, this is for the future. I'll be gone long before I think some of the ideas are going to come forth, and you know, well, we'd love to be able to do this, and it's not a one size fits all, regardless of whatever that tag says on the clothing. It's not, I can tell you that. But the so this is just really kind of giving that flexibility. So I don't know if that quite answers your question adequately or not, but so I guess I click answer live. Oh, already did this. So okay. Thanks, Sean. So others? Is there anything else you want me to ramble on about?
Thanks, Jim.
Take that as a personal slight. So, okay. All right. Actually, I'd like to. I'll read this. Actually, I would like to ask about membership fees. I've asked on several occasions, could it be possible to introduce different payment options, especially for international members, i.e. payment by installments? I don't know that we've ever actually looked at the idea of payment by installments. I don't know quite how that would work. We have an association membership system that we use that has, you know, you have to configure it a certain way. And I know the way we currently have it configured does not allow for, I think, installment payments, setting different options like that. So I don't honestly have a good answer for that. I think that's something we could look at.
Right. But I would also say that the changes to the bylaws allows us to actually think about looking at that, because under the current constitution and bylaws, it says members have to pay their whole fee, which would imply that you could not pay installments. You wouldn't necessarily be considered. One could argue that point. So I think this might give right, potentially, I don't know, Abdullah, but this would certainly allow the board the flexibility to look at that and see if from an infrastructure point of view, there would be some possible way of doing that.
And this also is an operational issue as well, us at headquarters to deal with it when we hear from members on a case-by-case basis too, to be able to work with folks and not have to go through any complex rigid governance structure to be able to help our members, that headquarters staff can just work with you if our system is able to enable that.
Mm. So I think that's one of the goals in general we're trying to have overall, is having more, not necessarily in more flexibility, because, you know, the reality is we could do anything in the future that we could get members to agree to. What we're trying to do is give us a little more flexibility in terms of timing. So if we wanted to be able to address an issue and it conflicts with the current constitution and bylaws, we have to go through a long process to get those documents changed. And we still want to enshrine some of those key aspects, but, you know, issues like this are things that we want to be able to address a little more timely, a little faster, and provide those varying options through these documents. So that is, you know, one of the objectives we're trying to achieve out of all of this. So, others? Nope. Also the change membership fees for emerging countries. There have been extensive conversations about membership fees, kind of an indexing, if you will, from what country. We asked the membership associate board to kind of look at this issue and see if they could propose something. And I think the answer is we haven't really gotten there yet. We haven't really looked at that. We've looked at other associations and we're not really seeing that happen very much. Most associations don't index their fees by what country the member comes from. I think one of the challenges we'd also have with that is we have many of our members that are transitory in their work habits. You know, they may live in this country for some period of time, then work in another country, either as an expat or they actually move there. So the mechanics of administering something like that would be incredibly challenging. So Mr. Hamilton asked, why didn't you write the organization manual first and then change the C&B later, or I guess CBL? The reason is because if the Constitution and bylaws changes do not pass, then the organization manual will be updated in one direction. If it does pass, then we'll have to update a different way, because we want to make sure that the organization manual is in sync with the governance documents, the bylaws in particular. So we would end up having to do it twice if for whatever reason it didn't pass. So we have gone through and made an extensive effort to kind of stage everything to be ready to do those updates. We've identified which policies and procedures will not require updates, which will require updates, whether those updates will be significant or not. And we've prioritized them. And our goal is in very short order after the election is over and we have the final results, we will undertake the top priority ones very quickly and try to get them out in a month or so. Save International is offering different rates to, so Abdullah asked, said, Save International is offering different rates to its member according to World Bank Index. Okay. Again, so that's it. The issue is just because someone says they're in Australia, and actually Australians would pay more, I think, compared to the US. And some countries would pay more. I think that's, you know, some people always think about, oh, I have to pay too much, but you know, some countries the rates would actually go up. But again, if someone is just temporarily in another country, do they get a different rate or not? So the administration of that would be very challenging. So, but I appreciate that Save International, that's someone that we could look at to see how they structure theirs and see if they'll share that information. So thank you. AACE does it as well using the World Bank Index. Okay, thank you. I know, like when I was regional director, I looked at the members for the Houston section. I was region director 5. And in the Houston section, I had, I don't know, 400 and some odd members. But their addresses listed about 20 different countries for people that still considered Houston their section. Now, whether they just never updated their section assignment when they moved to another location, or whether they were temporarily in another country or not, it's hard to say. So those are some of the challenges that we'd have to try and address. All right, sometimes I don't know whether someone's just typing really long messages or if everyone's done. Anything else? Ah. Deb, do you want to try and address this one?
So what are the specifics of the AACE governance information? I'm not quite sure what you're asking. If you can clarify.
Well, I think I know what he's talking about. So when I went to the CEO symposium, I guess 2 years ago now, or yeah, something like that. Their governance information was really geared towards smaller, more nimble board of directors, very streamlined governance documents, bylaws, and really trying to put as much as possible into something like an organization manual, policies and procedures, such that the organizations had more flexibility to make changes and adapt as the world around us changes. And this was prior to the pandemic. So I think the need for that has only been accentuated since then, but they were advocating for that. And we've actually seen some other organizations that have gone through this and been very similar exercises to what we're doing. And they faced some of the same challenges prior to going through these reorganizations, and we're approaching them in very similar ways. So those were some of the lessons learned that we were trying to adapt also.
Gotcha. And if I can just add a tangent to that for those on the webinar who don't know, ASA is the American Society for Association Executives. It's the AACE for people like me who run associations. And I'm pretty well connected with that community and have been for a long time. I'm certified with them, and I've been talking to quite a few folks over the past 6 months about their process through their bylaws change, whether they're like associations to ours in size and scope or industry, or completely different industries. Been chatting with folks around best practices related to that. So that also has contributed to this update.
Alan's asking for what organizations have made these changes and how did it work?
Many, if not all, associations make regular or semi-regular updates to their bylaws. This extensive. There's one association in particular that I have been connected to over the past couple of months, the Entomological Society of America, so insects. They had a really robust process that they went through a pretty massive change, and they're a very large association. I'm happy to get you a list offline, Alan, of folks who I've spoken to, and whether they're in this industry or not. Happy to do that.
Okay. Others? Anyone that's into the evening hour have questions? What do we can about what do we care about an organization that's concerned?
Subject matter doesn't matter in association management. You know, for me in particular, before I came to AACE, I was in healthcare. So I know how to run an association. I'm not a subject matter on cost engineering. That's what you folks are for. Similar to an entomological society, their leadership, their executive director is not an expert in insects, but they are an expert in association leadership.
Okay. More. I'm assuming they don't refer to their members as insects, right?
I do not know.
Okay.
I'm sure there are some great inside jokes there, though.
I'm okay. Are you going to get your CCP?
Maybe.
She's going to wait and see if we do an installment plan for the certification fee.
I see Jenny's pulling at some of the inside jokes on "You are really bugging me." Don't bug me.
Well, if no one else has any further questions, you can always email me after the fact with any questions that you have. I'll be happy to address them. It is, I should know this, AACE, AACE Prez at aacei.org, or Jenny may know that better than I would. It's on the website, at least. If you look under staff, it'll show the leadership, and it'll have my email address.
Chris, there is a question in the chat from Dexter. Will the existing constitution and bylaws be sent to members with highlights in yellow, changes for comparison purposes?
No. Quite honestly. The changes were just too extensive to kind of go through that type of exercise. I think the narrative that is posted on the website currently kind of gives you a little more detail than we've offered here in terms of how everything was dealt with. One of the things we have done, though, is we made sure in everything we did with the current documents, we have highlighted those areas where we know we need to make sure when we update the organization manual that we pick up these things, that they aren't dropped altogether. So, but we haven't really done like a track changes of where everything was done line by line. So, okay. Is that it then? Then without further ado, then I appreciate everyone taking the time to join us. Again, you can email me if you have any further questions that you didn't think of yet or were not in a position to ask, and we will follow up with you. So thank you very much for joining, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening, day, whatever the case may be. And don't forget to vote.